Basically, to I guess summarize it, it's a cat K with a narrative argument. I make slight arguments about how capitalism affects people in poverty, how exploit people in poverty, how in theory it sounds good, but in practice capitalism sucks, I guess. Another thing, I'll run an argument framework, whereas I frame the way the judge should vote, and basically that's all it is in a nutshell. So you want to get it? Okay, two government programs aimed at abolishing poverty have caused the spread of poverty. Republican '09. Thus, it appears that government, while attempting to abolish poverty, had actually contributed to the spread of poverty. The push for breaking the cycle of poverty using government interventions had been an utter failure. Instead of breaking generational poverty, it has effectively contributed to the continuation over the last several decades. Yet, despite all the evidence, the government continues to press forward with its good intentions. When aid to those in poverty was made available, like aid to those with disabilities, the government found that their ranks only begun to swell, but continue to swell. The entrenchment of government assistance to those who are already in poverty, even those who were not, provide an incentive to either remain in poverty or enter the ranks of the poor. The government programs taught generations how to live in constant state of dependency. So basically, all this is saying is that government interventions on trying to help poverty have continued the very generational cycle of poverty by creating this notion that if I give you social services like food stamps and Section 8, I can continue giving you a notion of social services. So what I mean is social services may be ethical at its basis, but it doesn't destroy the generational poverty that most, unfortunately, African Americans feel, but most people in America feel abroad. And what I mean by that generational poverty, that poverty, since my ancestors were slaves, there was no passing down inheritance. There was no accumulated wealth passed down towards me that I could use to, I guess, gain profit or whatever off of. So intentions on trying to break that down has been an utter failure because of the fact that we use social services like Section 8, but you never question why that generational poverty is implemented in the first place. Why there need to give Section 8? Why there need to give food stamps? I think is the ultimate question that people with a poor should answer. What has made my life to the point where I have to accept governmental assistance? I think ultimately that's the question that we need to talk about. And this is why capitalism is so bad, because it creates the dependency and never talks about it. Next card. The corporate market institutions' ethics are based on consumption that deal with only pleasure and edge out important values like love to self and love to others. Race Matters, Cornel West, 1993. Like all Americans, African Americans are influenced greatly by the image of comfort, convenience, machismo, fertility, violence, and sexual stimulation, and that bother consumers. These seductive images contributed to the predominance of the market-inspired way of life over all others, and thereby edge out non-market values. Love, care, service to others handed down by preceding generations. The predominance of this way of life among those living in poverty-ridden conditions was limited capacity to ward off self-contempt and self-hatred, resulting in the power and triumph of the nihilistic threat in Black America. So basically what this is saying is that through market institution ethics, which only usually deal with profit, they edge out other ways to, I guess, self-value. They confine what self-value or value is through this pushing away or dealing away love to self, passing down to generations. And the problem with that is it creates this notion of consumption that corporate market institutions benefit off of. So I think ultimately what we need to question, as Cornel West says, is that why does it seem that these corporate market institutions, with their push for being good or gaining profit, edge out these values that we all as humans need very much? And I think what we need to question is, why is this so prevalent and not talked about in the status quo? Because they gain from this. They gain by edging out this notion of change, or edging out self-value, because without self-value you can make profit, so you can consume to make yourself seem more valuable. So I think that's another reason why capitalism is so bad. The theory of free trade is that it solves poverty. The reality of it is that it manages and intensifies poverty. The disjoint between free trade in theory and practice is an inherent roadblock. Lincoln and Haynes, A New Protectionism, 1993. Free trade is, in theory, a system where traders are allowed to exchange money and goods without any concern for national barriers. There should be few legal constraints, no artificial protection, or subsidies influence the freedom of exchange. Traders, the theory goes, need to be free to do what they like. The presumption is that traders know what they are doing, and the markets will sort out any other problems emerges. Whether these problems are relative decline of British or U.S. economy, threats to the environment from wasteful energy policies, or inappropriate systems sold to the third world. Problems will be resolved by determining how much somebody is willing to pay to get them solved. to get them sorted out. Free trades argue that primary concern is to increase the size of the world economic cake, and that once this has happened, there will be more to share around, and some of it will trickle down to the poorest. The analogy is that the wealth creation is like an icing falling down the size of a giant cake. So basically, this is the question of how free trade in theory works, but in practice, it doesn't work at all. The notion of how Obama could push the $787 billion stimulus plan in the free trade market seems that it will go down and then trickle down to the poorest. And the problem with that is that that usually doesn't never happen. If you think about how things are being fixed economically, they're always going to the high class and then go down to the lower. And the problem with that is it creates this theory that that money accumulation is at the top of the thing. It's like the top of the notion of what you should aspire to be. And the problem with free trade is that it creates this notion of what we should do as a system and how we should accumulate wealth. Not only wealth economically, but I guess emotionally or I guess spiritually in this notion. And the problem with free trade is it creates this notion of what we should do as a people. In fact, what we should do as a people is build our metaphysical and spiritual notions instead of, I guess, doing this pointless consumption. And to go to our framework, we will frame this debate through identity, purpose, and method. We feel that the best way for us as debaters to show our souls and philosophy through our arguments. Identity. We feel in order to show our lives narratives, we must show how free trade capitalism affects me and my partner. But unfortunately, the overall debate community sees the affirmative case as an inorganic third-person position, with us acting as the United States federal government and giving a policy-based solvency. So we will take the position of African-American people under the capitalist society. We refuse to act as if we are the United States federal government because we simply are not. So basically what this is saying is that through identity, we represent ourselves in this debate round. We represent African Americans under a capitalist regime. And what we mean by regime is that capitalism destroys political awareness among our community. It seems to destroy the notion of what we should do as a community. And not only that, it destroys the effectiveness of our words. And we're saying debate in this inorganic fashion has created, I guess, this notion of what United States federal government should do, and we should represent the United States federal government because of it. And I think ultimately the problem with debate is that it established this as the norm, that you must be, as a affirmative case, give a United States federal government. You as the affirmative must represent the United States federal government. And I think ultimately what we need to question is why is this so? And the answer to that is that the reason why that's so, because outside the debate round, that is seen as the norm. That the only way you can make change outside the debate round or inside the debate round is by using the United States federal government or voting. And we're not saying that's absolutely bad, but if that's seen as the only way to make change in a debate round where we are not the United States federal government, then it's inorganic and it treats debate as a third-person who's outside looking in. We're saying that we're in the debate round, we're making change through our arguments in this debate round, we're educating people how capitalism affects us and people outside the debate round. And then we go to our purpose. Our purpose for our style of debate is not to change or help, or is to change or help change the current style of debate and change it from its technocratic methodology, but to more realistic and organic fashion, and change the language of the debate from a third person acting, but to a real life narrative that can be displayed in this debate round. So basically, to reiterate what I said, is that our purpose is to use our framework as a narrative, to use arguments as a mechanism to make change and to change the methodology of the current norm of debate. So through our purpose is to do this because we feel as though this is the only way for a debate to be real and organic. And to go through our method. Our method is through our narratives and our framework of this debate. We use this method to help explain the political position under a capitalist regime. And basically we're using these narratives and these arguments to express how we feel capitalism affects our lives, but not only our lives, but American people abroad that have felt this, this regime and the destruction that capitalism clearly does. And to go to explaining our framework even more as far as language, I go to my Toni Morrison card. Our first argument is framework. We will argue using our methodology of liberation. Arguing from our own space of personal agency, this means that our debate will be largely about language. Morrison 93. What could have been the intellectual history of any discipline if it had not insisted upon being forced into the waste of time and like that rationalizes for the representation of dominance require lethal discourse of exclusion, blocking access of cognition for both the excluded and the excluded. So basically what this means is that our framework represents the excluder and the excluded. We I guess, trivialize, or we go against the notion that we have to be in a notion of looking back. We use this in the now. Our arguments are in the now. We're changing in this debate round. Our framework, and as Toni Morrison says, we talk about the destruction of the excluded and the excluder, and how the destruction of the excluder excludes us in this debate round. And to go to our next and final